What is up, people? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Finnish occult folk group Hexvessel. The band's new album, Polar Veil, will be released on September 22nd via Svart Records. Haunted by primal forest spirits, Matt Kvost McNerney summons the ghosts of his past in a jaw-dropping, unheard-of rebirth of style and sound. At once unmistakably Hexvessel, Polar Veil is also steeped in the nocturnal atmosphere of McNerney's past, churned in the cauldron of black metal, ritual folk psychedelia, and doom rock, and
Churn that cauldron, bitch.
echoing with shivering Gothic undertones. Holed up in a home studio in his log cabin during the winter of 2022. I know, it's the year of the log cabin.
Thing now? Is this just the thing now?
Yeah.
Like, I understand that Scandinavia and Finland are beautiful places. I understand that. I understand that there is something haunting about the beauty of their landscapes. But does everyone just have a fucking studio in a wooden cabin?
Yes. It would be safe to say that is correct.
You know about the fucking fifth press release in the last, like, this is now replaced during COVID. You know what I mean? Like, this is the end thing. We need to start bringing our shows from a wooden cabin. I'm just saying we need to buy a wooden cabin, kit it out, and then go on location for recordings from now on.
You've pretty much got a wooden cabin in your backyard.
I do have a wooden cabin. It's not soundproof though. There's a train track right behind, so as long as you don't mind it every 20 minutes, like that going past, we're fine.
Let's do it.
We're fine. Also, it's not properly soundproof, so every time I shout the words like, "Oh, gets my dick hard," like, people will think I'm shitting porn in it. So, last thing I want is my neighbours thinking I have an OnlyFans. So, like, no one's subscribing to that. So,
where was I? McNerney drew on all the fundamental elements of his music career as a shamanic shapeshifter with only the isolation of nature solitude as inspiration. Painting an aura with Polar Veil, which resonates with solitary reflection and themes of personal spiritual transcendence, Hexvessel's new album is a bold statement from an artist who continues to reinvent and explore nature mysticism through music. Nature represents freedom, darkness, and the call of the wild. Black metal has always been at the borders of my sound and playing at the heart of everything I do. Tradition, nature, ritual, mythology, mysticism, and philosophy, along with clashing and jarring chords, have always been synonymous with Hexvessel. It was natural with Polar Veil, finally now as we reach the zenith of the journey, that these influences surface to the human ear, and with the freezing cold guitar sound that the climate here demands. On the process of recording Polar Veil, McNerney explains, "I built a studio at home in the log hut of our field, surrounded by large trees called Pine Hill, to escape from everything and everyone. Polar Veil is what a spiritual home sounds like. When the components of the medicine are familiar but brewed in a completely novel concoction, the resulting side effects can be deliriously intoxicating. Peer behind this Polar Veil for a breath of fresh tundra air." So, yeah, we've already reviewed Matt's other band, Grave Pleasures, this year.
Yeah, he's a busy guy, doesn't he? Like, he doesn't do things in half measures. Like, one would have thought, I've not released a Hexvessel album in a few years. I've not released a Grave Pleasures album in a few years. I'll release one this year, and one next year.
Makes sense.
And he's like, "Fuck that!
No,
there you are. There's your dinner.
There's your dinner. I have a cabin in the woods.
There is your dinner. It's on a plate, biatch." Most Glaswegian thing ever. So yeah,
yeah, we were obviously still acutely aware that Hexvessel were going to be dropping something later this year.
Are you saying that because we've had this album for like 2 months?
Maybe. Didn't really know what to expect from this. I hadn't heard anything about it. And then when I heard like the singles, I was like, what's going on here? What's happening here, Matt? But I love how this guy works. You know, we know he's super talented, and we know that anything he puts out is going to be of a high quality. Yeah, coming from Kindred in 2020, there is, as the press release says, a bit of a switch in terms of style.
Yeah, like this is unlike anything Hexvessel has done before.
True,
but colossally different. I mean, there's connective tissue, there's sinew there for sure.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
But as he overall, as an aura, as a vibe, as he tone, as he texture, something tangible, this is very different.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll let you go. I'll let you go for it. You've been listening to this for a while. I'll let you get it off your chest. What are you thinking about this album?
Right, so I love Svart Records. The reason I love Svart Records is they're not the album's out on Friday, I'll give you it on Thursday sort of label. They're like that. The album is out 2 months from now.
Yeah.
Here it is. I've had time with this album. Once again, that we are recording on the same session that we've recorded another review, which had autumnal imagery and themes about it. And the weather hasn't quite got there yet. However, this one, when it first came in, the British summer was in full effect, so it was miserable as sin. There was no hot weather, and it was overcast and kind of cold. So actually, weirdly, when I listened to this the first time round, it was perfect. I revisited that 3 days ago, not so much. So Kvot's a really interesting vocalist. He has a tone which at times feels like when you hear him on like Beast Milk or Grave Pleasures, it fits. And you're like that, he's got that kind of 80s goth kind of punk rock sound.
Yeah.
Weirdly, that transcends so well to other things. He did that collaboration with Carpenter Brute, and that's it. Like I was like, he should be on every synthwave album. When he does Hexvessel as well, which has a more kind of paganistic of the earth sort of tone, it really, really works there, and a kind of folksy sound as well. So, and I know he says in his press statement there that he's always been kind of touching on the black metal, and it kind of has to an extent, but I don't think I would have ever said, any of his projects are influenced that way in any tangible factor that I'd be able to say, there's a clear influence from black metal here. And I'm very careful because black metal fans, we love you, are really touchy about for a genre that doesn't give a fuck. Apparently they give a fuck about quite a lot. They get very touchy when you mislabel something. So let me put it this way. This captures the aesthetic, the tone, and the feel of black metal without being a black metal album, right? So it definitely is not a black metal album, right? It definitely leans heavily into it. At points there are bits that feel blasty and shreddy and lo-fi and kind of, you know what I mean? And so definitely those bits in there has a lot of the kind of theatrics of black metal as well at times, but it's still weirdly an intrinsically Hexvessel album at its core, and that mostly comes from Matt's vocals. I think he's really went through a transformation in the last couple of years. I think his work on the most recent Grave Pleasures album showed that he had range that I didn't think he actually had, and really pushed himself. He's pushed himself even further here. We get moments where he's almost, you feel like he might be crooning to the moon on top of a barren hillside, in front of a funeral pyre. Is that sort of kind of woo? Like it's fucking great. The hardest thing for me to try and encapsulate on this one is the overall tone, because it does shift. So you're right, when you listen to the singles, which I think the first one was Older Than the Gods, which I think was a double single as well. When I was listening to that, I was like, oh right, we're getting a shift. So it's a bit like, it's not as well polished as previous Hexvessel albums. It's been stripped back quite a bit, but there's still that kind of pagany, sort of folksy sort of tone in there. But it's just a little frayed around the edges. It feels worn. Like the best stuff of, like, he's got a worn sound, a voice, feels of an era. The music certainly encapsulates that as well. There's a very kind of almost slightly better than they could have produced black metal at the time 80s feel to this. Like if you go back and listen to Old Battery and you were to clean it up a little bit, it's not that far off what you're hearing here in parts. The vocal, like, see, I don't read the press statement, so I don't know if you got a lyric sheet with this one, but he's such an audible and clear voice. You know what he's singing about, and the man is a fucking dark poet. Like I would happily, like, sacrifice a goat round the fire with him if he asked me to. He's just got that sort of presence about his vocals. And it kind of shifts in tone. Like, the first half of the album is very much a kind of introduction to the new sound. It's kind of very much more a kind of a communal experience. It feels like it's pulling you in. I think you then, from A Cabin in Montana, which starts to bring in the kind of feelings I felt anyway of isolation, through Eternal Meadow into Creepshaller Creatures, those tracks really kind of get very, very, very black metal-y and dark. And then the album starts to pull back towards Ring and Homeward Polar Spirit, which kind of bring back the sound. So in a weird way, and I hate using this word on these recordings, the album takes you on a journey, Dave.
Oh, hello.
Let's follow this journey.
My old
and
friend.
it really, really works. I like the song placement here. I think it gives you enough of the tone and the vibe that by the time the darker shit kicks in, you are fully immersed in, all right, this is what Hexvessel sounds on this album. I think had it kicked off, like the opening track was Creepshaller Creatures, I think we've really been in a position where we're like that, oh, the man's fucking lost it. You know, one bad acid trip too many, and he thinks he's Satan. I'm kind of glad that they didn't go along that line. If anything, actually, they place the songs quite well, almost telling a story. It does have a feel of like chapters in a book, and you turn to the next chapter, and where is our reluctant hero ending next? My first bunch of listens on this one connected to an extent in that I thought there was 2 or 3 really, really good songs, a couple that really missed the mark for me, and I thought it finished pretty strong. And I'm glad I took that break, because I actually think if I had kind of hyperfixated on that for another month before we came to review it, I wouldn't be in the position I am now, having taken that month away from it and coming back in the same week that I've listened to something on the other extreme of heaviness in this recording session, which is also of a season, of a time, of an experience. I found myself warming up to this, no pun intended, warming up to this polar spirit a little bit more than I expected to. In fact, if anything, that time away from it made me appreciate it a whole hell of a lot more. I think it does suffer at times from a bit of a personality kind of complex, where I think it nails some of the brief and even the tone really, really well. I think in at least 1 or 2 songs, it gets a bit aimless. It pulls it back in, but it does feel like it's kind of trying to capture a vibe, a tone, and the track kind of loses itself a little bit. But by the end of it, it's found itself, it's linked it back, and it sticks a landing. Every track sticks a landing for me. The star of the show will always be Kvoss vocals. I think you'd almost have anything underneath him, and he would make it sound elevated and emotional and impactful, and that's here. I remember, like, specifically this week, I was listening, I've already told the story in another review, I was listening to albums on my back doorstep, and I live fairly remote, and as a result there ain't many streetlights where I live, and I can see right up into the heavens and right up to the stars, and Eternal Meadow was on, and towards the end of that song, he fucking cuts loose with his vocals, and they start to soar. I was getting visible goosebumps listening to it. Like, just, it caught me and it lifted me and it made me feel like I could feel myself just getting all, like, almost staticky. It was like there was like a tangible presence. And he does that almost better than any vocalist walking the planet right now, where he just hits you with something you're like, all right, this is just how it's fucking done. Hexvessel are always going to be a band who won me over with Translucent Eyeball the first time I heard it, and was like, yes, this is what I want. It's kind of Opethy, and it's kind of Mastodon-y, but it's really pagan-y, and it's got this fucking 60s, 70s thing. And I foolishly hooked myself on that album to the point where I was like, that's what Hexvessel sound like. And to be honest, if you listen to their discography, no two albums sound really alike side by side. There's connective tissue, but they're not the same. As journeys go, I'm kind of glad he's got this out his system, to be honest with you. The same way that we were kind of excited this year when the guys from Crippled Black Phoenix did Johnny the Boy. And they were like that, we've got this black metal kind of thing going on, and we're just going to see where it goes. And they released an album which was fucking on fire. And I kind of feel the same way here. I think he's had stuff that's been brewing in the background, and he's used the time wisely and probably the best place on the planet to do it, and kind of try to capture something. I don't think it's their best album. I don't think it always hits the mark, but it's the most emotionally connected I've been to a Hexvessel album. Might be the most emotionally connected I've been to anything he's ever done, actually. I feel like he's bearing his soul to me all the way through this one.
Yeah.
And that overcomes some of the shortfalls in the music for me, and at times some of the rough edges in the production. So yeah, I've really kind of went through the ringer on this one. I find it an infinitely fascinating album.
Yeah.
Like I kind of feel like of all the albums in his discography, if we ever got to a chance to interview him again, I would spend more time talking about Polar Veil than anything else he's ever done, because I just want to unpack what was going on.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I've had a weird relationship with Hexvessel. The Grave Pleasure stuff I've always enjoyed. Like every album I've really enjoyed. With Hexvessel,
it's more consistent though. You know what I mean? It has a genre. I don't think Hexvessel really have a genre.
Yeah, and I think, like you're saying, each album is quite different. Although there is things that connect them. They all do sound quite different. I loved When We Are Death. I think it's an incredible album. I love that album. And in my opinion, the albums that kind of followed that, although very similar with that kind of occult, kind of folky, doomy style, didn't quite hit the same levels for me. Not bad albums, but just didn't feel quite as memorable. And in some ways, I think this album was the perfect time to make that jump into something a little different, while still keeping, some of that original Hexvessel character instilled. I'm not going to lie though, this was a different listening experience to what I was expecting. My initial thoughts were, this album is named perfectly. Like, you could not pick a better name for this album. This album is colder than a witch's tit. It is glacial, absolutely glacial, and that feeling came over me.
Freeze the balls off a brass monkey.
It really would. Like that first track when it kicked in, it just came over me instantly. Like the guitars are really, really frosty and blackened, but it's infused with that kind of like outdoorsy. You've got the birds chirping in the background. It's got that kind of woodland like kind of surrounding to it. I could see my breath when I was listening to this album. You know what I mean? I felt like I was outside, fucking in the wilderness, in winter clothing, walking through a forest. And it's an album that is steeped in that like that kind of folky kind of atmosphere with a really kind of bitter cold heart to it. When I first listened to it, I kind of just stared into space for most of it. Like I was like kind of in a trance listening to it the whole way through. And
that's what I'm saying. Like at a campfire, he says, like, cut this goat's throat. Yes, master. What is thy bidding, master? Well, he used the word shamanic. I was like, yeah, that's what he is. He's he's a future cult leader. See if Kavos wants to start a cult.
Yeah.
Cult Hexvessel. I would probably join it.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I usually, like, my first listen, I usually take like small notes. I'll be like, if something catches me, I'll be like, all right, take a note of that, take a note of that. I never took a single note on the first listen of this album, nothing at all. I was just like kind of locked into it and was just kind of in this kind of like hypnotic kind of trance the whole time. And afterwards, I, like, when I first listened to it, I finished it, I was like, I needed a completely different type of album to listen to kind of reset myself, and kind of take me out of this like haze that I was in, because
Let me guess, Smash Mouth. Greatest hits.
Dude.
Somebody want... Is it too soon?
Too soon. A bit too soon. Yeah. I'll see you later. It's been a pleasure. We drank for Duncan, everybody.
Yep.
Last review. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. It's not an album that's filled with like huge like hooks and sing along choruses. It's not like Grave Pleasures in that way, where there's something like gets in your head and you're like snapping your fingers and like singing along. But at the same time, it is kind of gloriously bleak and haunting. It sits very much within a blackened, folksy, psychedelic doom kind of territory.
It sits in its own genre. Let's be honest.
Kind of does,
you could endlessly compare this to bands that don't sit even remotely in similar genres.
Yeah,
You know what
absolutely. Yeah, and the kind of switch ups and the transitions are quite understated at times on tracks like Older Than the Gods, but on the other hand, they can also hit you with a track like A Cabin in Montana, which is like full of like tremolo pick guitars and ritualistic kind of vocals. But aside from the tracks that burst into like that kind of full black metal tempo, or where it gets a little bit avant-garde, there's certain tracks that just kind of take their time. Like they just kind of lead you on this very spiritual like kind of expedition. And from a kind of vocal point of view, it feels like weirdly infectious. Like there's no big hooks, like choruses, but it was still in my head. And I think it's kind of similar to what we spoke about on Grave Pleasures, in that his kind of like poetic kind of style. There are certain lines and phrases that just kind of get stuck in your head, or they're delivered in a really kind of like with a real ghostly like tone. Eternal Meadow was filled with those kind of moments where his voice just kind of gives you chills. There's also moments where I feel like he is kind of pushing his voice into new places, trying different tones, which I loved. And the same can be said for the album itself. He's taken this album into new territory, blending in genres that sound like they can be linked to Hexvessel, but also ones that Matt has clearly had a fondness of for many years. And I think as a band, they do it incredibly well for this to be their kind of first attempt at trying something different. I kind of love the direction this has taken. I know what you were saying about like the kind of the Johnny the Boy thing, but I'm hoping
they capture it to an extent, but they don't detrimentally change their sound, if you know what I mean. There's still, we spoke about it at the time, there were elements on that sounded very much like, all right, so they did that black metal track, and this is an extension of that black metal track, but it's not the only thing they do. They still go back into a kind of punky rock thing like that. This is to me the embracing of like an influence fully. Like, see, when people like that, you know, I've really been listening to Bowie before recording this, and you hear one vocal hook on one track, and you're like, and it's a single, and you're like, that, right, that's the Bowie influence.
Yeah.
But it's not really inspired by Bowie.
Yeah.
This is all the way through it.
Yeah.
You know
absolutely.
what I mean? It's like, if anything, this is the foundation on which the album's built. It's not saying that it permeates every single fucking riff.
No.
But it's its core all the way through it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between being influenced by something and actually being influenced by something.
The fact that he hasn't done this as a separate project, though, makes me think that this isn't the end of this kind of this style and this tone that he's approached or he's given on this album. I feel like it is something that going forward there is going to be more of on Hexvessel releases, and I'm kind of all for that because I really enjoyed this. The production as well is like absolutely completely suited to the direction of taken. Hexvessel albums have always had that like retro vintagey vibe about them, but this is like even more unprocessed than any of their previous albums. It's got that like earthy, raw, as you said, that kind of black metal texture to it. I liked the kind of the balance they had on it though. I felt like they just took it kind of raw enough that it didn't go into like real kind of lo-fi territory. Like it still felt like it's weird, like because you could hear like it's almost got like you can hear like the hiss of like a cassette player, like that's like when you're getting to that kind of territory, it's kind of like okay, this is getting really lo-fi. They didn't go quite into there. It still sounds like
quite
it's
full Poison Ruin is what you're saying.
Yes, no, they didn't go there.
Held back just a little bit.
Yeah. This still sounds like it's been recorded in a proper studio, but it's very rustic, it's very rural sounding, but I feel like it just kind of adds so much character to it as well. I think that the production is perfect for the album. I am not the biggest kind of black metal fan, as I've said before. It's a genre I'm very kind of hit and miss with, but this was just the right amount of it for me. I think this is a brilliant album. I think it's possibly my second favourite Hexvessel album to date, and I really like this direction they've taken on Polar Veil. I think it's a really, really clever move to kind of separate it from what they've done previously, but it's still got Hexvessel in there. It's not like they've just been like, this is a new thing and we're sounding completely different. You can still hear it as Hexvessel in there, but with this whole other side to it, which I really liked. So rating wise, what would you score Polar Veil?
See, I'm coming in a 4.5 on this one, but I actually think the re-listening with the weather slowly changing, I have a sneaky suspicion it's going to be in my top 20.
Oh,
I love Johnny the Boy. And I'm comparing them because they're like blackened inspired albums that like I gravitated to very much like yourself. I'm not a fan of that particular genre of music. I love when it's used in an interesting way, but not like as a full commitment to.
Yeah.
But there's a depth, there's an honesty on this that really, really, really. It kind of reminds me. It's weird. Doesn't sound fuck all like it, but it's a feeling that I get inside. It's a I can't fight this feeling anymore. You know what I mean? It's fucking in it. Like there's something about certain songs, certain things you hear that like instantly evoke a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
This is as close as to just intrinsically grabbing me as the King Woman album did.
Yeah.
Where I just felt like felt like James Brown getting up for an encore and someone was putting I just feel like it envelops me.
Uh-huh.
So it's a 4.5 from me. I like this might by the end of the year I might be saying, you know what, this should have been a 5, which is weird because on paper there's about 2 or 3 elements in here that don't generally work for me on the level they do here, but he sells it. I've said it before, he's maybe one of the most honest vocalists out there, and he is, like a very fine wine, Dave, only getting fucking better. So yeah, at this stage now, I'm with you. I kind of hope this is the thing that sticks with Hexvessel.
Yeah.
And I kind of want him to explore more of this. More cabin writing, please. If you're listening to us, Kavost. So I'm a 4.5. I think this is really, really, really fucking good.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But interestingly enough, had you asked me this a month ago, I was coming in a 3.
Oh,
so
wow.
There you go. And that was after about 4 listens. I wasn't on the same level.
Right.
But now with a month removed, and like I say, that nighttime listen, staring at the stars, I was just like, you know when people say like that, like I took a reference in acid again. I took mushrooms, and I was out in a field, and all of a sudden I understood the universe.
Yeah.
That was my listening to this last night.
Okay.
So staring at the stars, I was just like, everything's connected. We're all connected. We're all stuck inside the polar veil. So yeah, 4.5 from me. What about yourself?
Nice. Exactly the same. Yeah, 4.5 from me as well. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I think this is, as I said, probably my second favorite Hexvessel album to date. I think it's a really clever move. I love the kind of character it has. It's got authenticity as well, which I loved. And yeah, Kvost vocally absolutely brilliant on the album. I think he was fantastic on this. So it's a 4.5 for myself as well. So this album, it drops on September 22nd on Svart Records. Links below to the band, to the pre-order. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Have a little listen. Stick some comments below. That is the review. Thank you for checking out. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone. Bye.